Yo, welcome back to the channel. I recently found and rolled the perfect inability for my class, and in this video I want to share with you the process of figuring out which inability to go for, as well as how to go about rolling the actual lines. Let's check it out together. The entry point for this discussion will be a legendary inability. Since this content is already so old, it is really easily achievable by just rolling the inability without locking any lines. If you have the money, you can roll the inability to unique and then use a couple of circulators to get it to legendary. It will usually rank up really quickly, but with that being said, you can also just keep rolling the inability and you'll get to legendary within a reasonable amount of honor. So let's start diving into the first resource that I have prepared for this video, and it is Grande's Library. This is a really good overview website for all classes in Maplestory, where you will also be able to take a look at the recommended inner abilities, which, for example, for my class, it is 20% boss damage, 8% at normal, and then it suggests either 38% buff duration or 21 attack. And to figure out which specific inability to go for between these two, let's take a look at my second resource here. And that is the Maple Scouter, maplescouter.com, where, if you're greeted by this page, you'll always find a bunch of Korean, because this site is for the Korean Maplestory community. If you scroll down a little bit, you can click on the Hexa rankings, and here you can take a look at different characters, right? You can filter for classes, and of course these are all in Korean, which is why I can always recommend to briefly translate this site into English. Let's figure out where Nightwalker is. Okay, here we go. And then let's just translate it back to Korean, because this site likes to break if it's Google translated for some reason. And here you can see the #1 Korean Nightwalker is level 294. If we just middle mouse button click on this guy's name, we can open up his character sheet in another tab, and we'll just do that for the first 5 characters here. Also notice how this guy looks like Naruto. Pretty cool, right? And let's just take a look at these guys here. Starting off with the rank 1 Nightwalker, we can see, his stats, his gear. He has a 25-star Dreamy Belt, crazy, right? But that's not what we're interested in. If we scroll down all the way, we can also see the inability that he's using. And again, this is Korean. We can briefly translate the page to see, this guy is using 20% boss damage, 21 attack, and 8% abnormal. So going back to the Grande's Library, we can see that the #1 guy in KMS is using the attack power inability. Let's check that out for the remaining players. Okay, 21, 21, 21, and 21. They are all using the attack inability, which kind of nudges me into the direction that I would also like to use the 21 attack inability. So back in the game, you see I went for the 21 attack instead of the 38 buff because of the Koreans, because they are 6 months ahead of the meta of GMS, right? And they have access to the auction house, and they can buy honor willy-nilly, and I assume the best players will always, reasonably quickly adapt to any meta changes, buy the honor and fix their inability, so I can prepare my inability, right? Okay, but you might say, actually, there's one caveat to this whole discussion. And yes, I do want to bring that up, and that are the version differences between Korean Maplestory and global Maplestory that we actually play here in the West, right? The big one is the attack speed cap, right? In GMS, we can break the attack speed, which means that some classes like to go for the +1 attack speed top line, right? And in that case, just recount the steps that we went through in this video. We are starting off with the Grande's Library, right? If the Grande's Library says the top line is attack speed, 100% go for the inability that the Grande's Library recommends. You can still check out the top Koreans, but they won't be using the +1 attack speed line, because that's just not a thing. And Initially, I said that is the big one. There's also a small one, and that is the Koreans don't have level 3 link skills, and specifically, they don't have the level 3 angelic buster link skill, which is affected by buff skill duration. So if you check out my first preset right here, I also have a 38% buff duration. So in the end, the Grandes library is kinda right. And what do we do now? Of course, like anybody else, the last resource that tops all other resources are the class discords, and I would just go into the general and ask. No, of course I wouldn't do that, right? They have their resources, and then I would resort to looking up the resources in the class discords, right? In order to find the class discords, you just type Maplestory class discords into Google, come to Reddit post which links to all the discords, and boom, you have all the resources at your fingertips. Now that you know what inability to go for, how do you actually go about rolling the lines? And that brings us to the last resource of this video, which is the inability calculator. You can just punch that into Google Maplestory inability calculator, and you will find this page where you can just put in your current inability and the gold inability that you figured out by either looking at Grandes library, the top Koreans, or your class Discord resources. And then you can decide if you just want to use honor and are on a 50% inability event, which, you know, I would always wait for that. And then you can just hit calculate and basically get instructions on how to roll your honor, right? And this is absolutely how I did it and how I successfully found my inabilities. So in conclusion, is there this one perfect way which determines your inability? Not really, because there will always be meta mix-ups and things that are like really close to each other. For example, here the buff duration and the attack are really close to each other in damage, and that's why both things get recommended, right? On top of that, there's this one edge case that I just thought of, right? And that is crit rate, because some classes do need the extra crit rate, and if you don't have a super established account, it doesn't even make sense to roll for your end game crit rate, because many classes need the crit rate that comes out of the artifact system, and this system just has a really slow build up and gives you 20% crit rate, which you can, for example, also get out of your inability in the meantime while you wait for your artifact stats or artifact level to catch up. That is another thing that you can do and choose to do, right? And I wanted to use that example to just get into my last point here, and that is use your brain, right? No, wait, that sounds kind of offensive. I don't mean it in an offensive way at all, right? Just think about the situation that you are in and why things get recommended, and then adapt. For example, I think the buff skill duration gets recommended because you want to have your AB link inside of your burst, right? So right now my burst is 30 seconds long, which means that I would need 200% buff duration in order to make the AB link 30 seconds long. Is this achievable with or without the buff skill duration from the inability? No, but I would at least be able to extend the AB link as long as possible for that duration, right? But I already know in 6 months from now, the 30-second burst duration is gonna be cut down to only 20 seconds, right? And I can reach 20 seconds of AB link skill duration even without the 38% buff skill duration. So I determined for myself, okay, for now it's probably better to use the 38%, but as soon as the patch hits, it will very likely be better to use the 21 attack inability. And that's why I have both, right? Other people would probably go for 2 farming inabilities, or, you know, one for the loot room with 20% item drop at the top, and one for farming with 20% mesos at the top and 15% item drop on a unique line, how I have it here. But for me, I think in my situation, it is worth it to have 2 bossing inabilities and only 1 farming / loot room inability. And that is really the notion that I would like to end this video on. This was part of my progression series, basically caused by me hitting the perfect inabilities, and I just wanted to flex these. Yep. No, of course. Just kidding. I hope this video was helpful to you, and I will see you in another one. Take care, everybody, and bye-bye.